U.S. President Donald Trump is prioritizing ending the war in Sudan, and Washington has presented the warring army and paramilitary rapid support forces with what U.S. officials say is a strong text. However, neither side have accepted the text at this stage. A recap of your top story. South Africa has officially transferred the G20 presidency to the USA after hosting the G20 summit in Johannesburg. The US did not attend the summit as it had planned to send a charge d'affaires for the handover. President Cyril Ramaphosa insisted that a representative of appropriate seniority be sent by Washington for the ceremony. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Matapelo Mahabe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Saudi Arabia backs $1 billion FIFA Development Fund, while Aston Martin Chief Executive Officer Andy Cowell is on the verge of losing his job. I'll tell you why at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 6 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good Tuesday afternoon to you, Africa. Here's what we've got on our business agenda this afternoon. The chairperson of the African Union and the president of Angola, João Lourenço, has called for fairer debt restructuring tools as well as innovative financing instruments to support Africa's development. We'll have a conversation around that with regional finance and economic analyst Bernard Wanji, who's based in Cameroon, and the World Bank's reaction to Kenya's public debt burden, which has now reached approximately 68.8% of the country's GDP in the 2024-2025 fiscal year. These are just two of the items on the agenda as we continue also looking at SA-China relations as well as the Zimbabwe-Zambia Energy Projects Summit, which is set to take place from tomorrow until the 28th of November. Do engage with us on the various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa. Welcome to it.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We begin here this afternoon with Black Friday. Look, it's no longer just a day on the calendar. It's no longer just any other Friday. In South Africa, Black Friday has now become a national moment. It's a moment when South Africans tap, they swipe, they scroll, they click their way through one of the biggest spending events of the year. It has indeed become a calendar event. And this year, which is 2025, is shaping up to be no different. Dimakatso Leshuru has all the details for you.
The financial industry is poised to make the most of the coming Black Friday on the 28th of November 2025. Banks are anticipating another strong surge in activity, with total transactions expected to exceed $190 million, continuing the momentum seen last year. Pay Inc. data shows that last year's shopping trends were shaped by several factors, including the overlap of payday and month-end specials on Black Friday. But this year, over and above that, consumers are armed with improved purchasing power thanks to the lower inflation level and decreased interest rates that are likely to encourage increased consumer spending during Black Friday and the festive season. Elise Kruger, an independent economist, explains.
The additional perk of a low inflation environment is the fact that you've got your salary and wage increases being higher compared to the inflation rate. And that adds to your purchasing power, and that just give you a bit more bang for your buck, if you can put it that way. So from that point of view, 2025 will be the second consecutive year that salary earners will have real increases in their wage, and that's a very powerful, I would say, driver of consumer spending.
And as consumers prepare to hit the shops on Friday, experts are warning to keep emotions out of shopping. Dashni Naidu is the program manager for consumer education at First National Bank.
having a budget also transforms reactive spending into strategic opportunity. So the deal serves your goal, but doesn't give into your impulses and compromise you financially. Build a post-spend review into your process. Sit down, look at it, track your spend. Has it aligned with your goals? Think about the patterns that you see in your own spending over time, and understand what triggers you to spend. And I think sometimes when we actually see it, it can be quite jarring and sobering to see how we're spending, and then anchor joy in your impulses. You deserve to enjoy the festive season, and allocate an amount that you're going to spend towards these items.
Online shopping continues to rewrite the script. In 2024, e-commerce didn't just grow, it surged. Transaction values climbed 37% and transaction volumes jumped a staggering 76%. Naidu says one of the biggest digital stories, virtual cards, saw usage grew by 59% year on year.
So what happens with the virtual card is that it hides your actual card number, your physical card, and it creates a temporary card number every time you transact. So because it's creating a temporary card number, fraudsters can't use it again, even if they copy it on a platform.
While Absa Bank also expects to see further growth from e-commerce, the bank has anticipated consumers will remain cautious with their spending and focus more on value for money. Andrew Wilmot is Absa's business banking executive for payment acceptance.
As retailers have moved to become omni-channel and giving the consumers more choice, we've seen basket sizes grow, we've seen the nature of the offers get bigger, we've seen the complexity of services and items change as well. So we can see this evolution into an omni-channel world, which many retailers, if not or the larger ones certainly, are pushing omni-channel for a better consumer experience. The basket size has been in and around the 375 Rand mark in store, and we expect that'll pretty much continue. But the basket size has grown by nearly 30% year on year. Currently sitting at 611 Rand in the e-commerce world, and so we think that basket size will expand further as the e-commerce channel continues to grow.
Black Friday is starting earlier again. Last year's spending from the week before the main event rose 25% from just 7% the year before. Retailers have again released promotions ahead of time, and categories like groceries, clothing, entertainment, tourism, and apparel are expected to remain active. But with more activity comes greater emphasis on safety. Ulrich Janse van Rensbeck, Chief Fraud Strategy and Analytics Officer at Absa Bank, has warned consumers to be vigilant.
When buying goods or services, only buy from reputable online stores. Never allowed to be redirected with a hyperlink to an online store where a Black Friday deal is available. Activate your bank notification and report any suspicious transaction to your bank immediately. Do not approve transactions or share sensitive information like a one-time PIN if you're not transacting. Be extremely cautious.
Black Friday may be about big deals, fast decisions, and high energy, but experts say it should also be a moment of smart choices, secure payments, and financial awareness. For Channel Africa News, Samdi Makatso Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 14 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. The chairperson of the African Union and the president of Angola, João Lourenço, has called for fairer debt restructuring tools as well as innovative financing instruments to support Africa's development. Addressing the 7th Annual African Union and European Union Summit, President Lourenço says there is a need for a new vision for the financial relationship between Africa and international lending institutions so that the continent can invest in development without being stifled by unsustainable debt. For more on this, we joined on the line by regional finance and economic analyst Bernard Wanji, based in Cameroon. A very good afternoon to you, Bernard. Good to have you with us once again on Africa in Business.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm ready to talk to you and to users.
This issue of the debt on the African continent and the debt burden has been very key, not only to Africans, but also to the lenders of Africa. And it was also very key to the discussions that took place at the G20 Leaders Summit this past weekend in South Africa. But how would you describe the current debt landscape on the African continent? And perhaps while you're at that, what are the structural factors that are driving the rise in the debt distress?
Okay, thank you for that question, which is very broad. The question is very broad. So I would like to clarify two methodological issues. The first one is that the most debt analysis, sustainability analysis, they rely on the debt to GDP ratio. And we look at those indicators. The majority of African countries, they are below the limit of debt risk because the debt to GDP ratio ranges from 58% for Angola to 30% for the Congo to 43% only for Cameroon. So it does not show the debt distress because it is analyzed in terms of stock. I've been advocating during the past few years that we should rely on debt service ratio only, because when you look at the debt service ratio, it shows that Africa's debt for many countries is not sustainable. If you take the example of Cameroon, a country which I know very well, the debt will now absorb 40% of government revenues. So if you pay salary, how much is left for investment? If you take the case of Angola, which a case that I know very well because I was economic advisor, field economist in Angola for 6 years, from 2000 to 2006. It is shown that the foreign debt of Angola will absorb nearly half of the government revenues in 2025. So how much will be left for investment and for improving the living conditions of the population? So to summarize, I think that we should now be talking more about how much the debt service absorb on government revenues or on export revenues with regard to repayment of foreign debt. It is an important clarification. It is a statistical issue, but it is a more relevant indicator to show that Africa's debt is not sustainable.
There is a belief, Bernard, that the current global debt restructuring mechanisms are failing African countries. Is this something that you prescribe to, or are there other factors that are at play?
Well, you have to look at the origin of debt. There are 2 or 3 types of debt. Like for commercial corporations, you know that analyzing debt using financial indicators. Those indicators were firstly designed for corporation, industrial and commercial corporations, and then they were extended to analyze the situation of governments. So if you look at the ratio for corporation, you have 2 levels of analysis. First of all, how was that debt generated? If the debt is generated because there is excess importation, you have a deficit of importation relative to exportation. Then you have commercial debt because you are using imports to import foodstuff and things that are not necessarily for the living of the population. So this is very, very bad debt. When you see large African when you see African countries that have large oil revenues like Nigeria, like Angola, like Cameroon, they still import 80% of their food needs. This is not sustainable. So you have to cut down on the importation of food, which is the easiest thing to do because in Africa you have large tracts of lands and large agricultural lands that are available. The second type of debt, and now, if you look at what is done in cooperation, you have to look at the theory of leverage. In commercial companies, leverage is very good as long as the company takes debt to improve its production facilities in order to improve sales and then to improve profit in the long term. This is very good debt. This is what we call in cooperation the theory of leverage. If it translate that into government policies, the good debt, even foreign or domestic debt, the good debt are debts that improve the infrastructure and the production potential of the country. That is good debt. But unfortunately, you have many countries that have poor infrastructure management. They poorly manage the infrastructure project, and that end up in overrun, cost overrun, and then multiple delays, so that the infrastructure have no return, no economic return on the medium term.
So Bernard, I hear that the responsibility of the African countries, what they use the debt for, are they leveraging it? Is it going to be income generating, for the country? That's one end of it, right? Then there's the other side of this conversation, which is how international lenders are pricing the risk of default on the African continent. Is there willingness, especially from Bretton Woods institutions and other international lenders, to change how they price the risk of default on the continent? And this is largely given to the fact that, yes, there are some countries that have defaulted, but not as many.
To be frank with you, I'm not part of that ideology, of pitting the rich countries against the global south. I'm not part of that ideology, because management principles are the same whether you are in Canada, in Mexico, or in Zimbabwe. Management principles are the same. If you apply good governance, good economic governance, you will know how to avoid falling into the debt trap.
Is there a responsibility on the likes of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to overhaul their debt sustainability frameworks to make them more fit for African countries? Do you believe that needs to be implemented?
Yeah, that has been done in the past, because there is a principle that there must be an equilibrium in the global ecosystem. You cannot indefinitely live in a situation where some countries have indefinite surplus, while some countries have chronic deficits. So there is a way to equilibrate economic system. That is, and then in 2010, there was that initiative supported by the rich country of G7 to alleviate the debt of the poorest country. That has been achieved.
Bernard,
but after 2010, we've got
Bernard, unfortunately, I'm going to my sincere apologies, Bernard. Our line is becoming quite compromised. We are losing you there. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask that we please end our conversation here for this afternoon, but very much appreciated. And your views there on African debt, how it ought to be utilized, and the role of the likes of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. But as you could hear, Bernard Owanji, who is a regional finance and economic analyst based in Cameroon, saying that good economic principles, those are standard. And whether you are Africa or any other continent, those should be primary and central. He takes us to 24 minutes after 4 p.m.
From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And so we continue our focus on the African continent and the debt burden as we turn our focus now to the World Bank. Now, the World Bank says Kenya's public debt burden has now reached approximately 68.8% of GDP. You'll remember in the conversation we had a moment ago with Bernard Owanji, he was saying that the debt service ratio is really what should be considered when you look at the indebtedness of a country and its debt burden, as opposed to this debt to GDP ratio, which is the common principle that is used there now. So this is something that the World Bank has noted as far as Kenya's public debt is concerned. It also noted that the country remains at a very high risk of debt distress. The international lender says the East Africa country continues to be classified as being at a high risk of debt distress, and this is due to vulnerabilities like a high debt service to revenue ratio, as well as exposure to interest rate shocks. For more on this, we joined on the line by Ruth Kinyanjui, a leadership, governance and economic analyst based in Kenya. Good afternoon to you, Ruth. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on Africa in Business. Perhaps let's start here. Is Kenya at risk of debt distress as per the warnings by the World Bank? Welcome.
Thank you so much. And yes, Kenya is highly indebted right now. We are actually roughly just around 70% of our GDP in debt. And that is actually the current projection in the 2024 and 2025 financial year. So that is, of course, a very high amount of debt as compared to our GDP. So yes, we have a high risk of debt distress.
And so what does this mean, this level of debt, for Kenya's fiscal sustainability over the next 3 to 5 years?
I normally look at Kenya very differently compared to other countries. One of the things that I normally say is, first, Kenya is a very resilient kind of economy. You can think it's just dying, then it just resuscitates. So despite the very high debt to GDP ratio, there are other maybe contributory factors that are affecting that. Of course, the large interest rate burdens that we have, and of course, the weak revenue performance, especially in the previous years. And we have already had this issue with our budgeting process that every citizen wants to be informed. And the fact that we are also very right now heavy reliance on domestic borrowing, and that borrowing is seen as the one that is actually balancing the foreign exchange rate and other areas. But when you mentioned the fiscal policy, which is largely our tax area, there's a lot of a high pressure on that, because for the last few years we haven't really met our fiscal budgeted amount in terms of taxes, and that then the government then cannot be able to meet its obligation. Then we have to move now to the reliance on debt. So there has been a problem in terms of, I can call it, like, we've not been able to widen the net in terms of bringing everyone to be in tax position. So as a result, very little contributes to what needs to be done, and as a result, that constrain us, and then the government has now decided to just move to debts.
And how does this public debt level of 68% and as you said, almost 70% of GDP affect the private sector confidence and the investment flows into the country?
One of the biggest things, especially in the private sector, is the fact that people cannot afford credit, because the crowding, everything has gone to the domestic borrowing by the government. So a large portion of that is within the country. So the same people of the private sector have also been are the same people who are lending to the government. So domestic borrowing, of course, is very expensive, because the matching of the T-bills and, of course, bonds is something very high. So there's a delicate balancing of people wanting to rebuild back to the private sector, a balance of whether taking that business or taking back to the government, who are seen to be paying something very decent, and that now affect even the crowding of credit, especially to the small and medium time enterprises, which form 80% of Kenyan economy. So you can imagine those people are straining in getting credit. As a result, the spurring of economic growth slows down, and as a result, things take a longer time to take shape. So that is really affecting the common Kenyan, the people who are living not only below maybe $2-3 a day, but even lesser than that. And those are the majority and the ones that contribute larger to the GDP of the country.
And as we wrap up, Ruth, really quickly, what are the solutions here? What are the reforms that could help Kenya boost the domestic revenue without slowing down that economic activity?
There's a lot of that. There's a lot that can be done. First, there's one thing that has always, there's another big problem we have always had, that some of the debts are actually not good debts. You know, they really didn't, maybe the project were not contributed, or they were not contributory back to the economy. So debt auditing is one of the things that has been spoken about a lot previously. And of course, there's a lot of policy that we can be able to come out of that through even something like debt reprofiling, and of course, just having really, some strategic relief, like Kenya aggressively pursuing buybacks. We have a lot of that is happening, and the government ensures that we do not collapse, But policy issues are very crucial, and those are the ones that can be able to turn us around, and especially around revenue and debt management, and also governance, which is a common problem in all African countries. And Kenya is not left behind. A lot of policy issues need to be put in perspective in terms of what direction should we head, because this debt crisis cannot continue like this. Also, the fact that also, I think one of the things that World Bank was looking at is ensuring that Kenya can now be able to borrow for longer term, for 30, 40 years to come,
Right.
so that it can be able to it can be able to repay without straining. Otherwise, there's an imminent issue of collapse. Although, even as we head to some of the big loans that we really fear about, we normally see a turnaround. But still, that turnaround is buyback, which still goes back to the future years of this country.
Ruth Kinjajui, we thank you so much for your insight and your time and your analysis this afternoon. Very much appreciated, ma'am.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. That's Ruth Kinjajui, a leadership, governance and economic analyst based in Kenya. She takes us to exactly 4:32 Central African time as we head over now to the markets desk, where Buntle Hedbush is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Thami. Good afternoon. And our final look at the indicators this afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 31 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13 Pula 32. Namibia, 17 Namibian dollars 31, and the Zambian kwacha is trading at 23 kwacha and 5. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 67. Ethiopia, 154 birr 11. In Uganda, it's 3,609 shilling, and in Tanzania, it's at 2,448 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,453 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 47 Egyptian pound 62. Tunisia, it's trading at 2 dinar 94. Algeria, 129 dinar 74. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 17. Angola, it's trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,193 to the US dollar this afternoon. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,136 per ounce, platinum at $1,560 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.47 a barrel. It's inched down a bit. And those are your indicators. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. Very good afternoon from the Sports Day. So FIFA have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Saudi Fund for Development. This to allocate up to $1 billion in consensual loans for the construction as well as the rehabilitation of sports stadiums and surrounding infrastructure in developing countries around the world. Now, FIFA said the agreement underscores a shared commitment to support developing nations in strengthening their sport ecosystems as part of the broader efforts to advance social as well as economic development. The program will prioritize developing nations and their respective FIFA member associations, helping them to invest in facilities that drive growth. A focus will be placed on countries with clear strategies to harness sport for national development. The partnership will also look to support national governments in designing, financing, as well as building multi-sport venues that meet international standards. Let's hear from FIFA President Gianni Infantino.
Well, let me say that today is really a very important day for FIFA, for world football, because we signed a memorandum of understanding, a real partnership with the Saudi Fund for Development. A partnership which will mean an investment of $1 billion to invest in stadium, in infrastructure, in football.
Now, Infantino further also reflects a significant global infrastructure challenge, particularly in Africa, where many countries lack a single stadium that meets international standards for hosting official matches. Now, this forces national teams to play their home games in other countries with approved venues.
There are many countries today who don't have even one proper stadium, who cannot play their national team games at home, who don't have a venue which complies with the international standards, with the FIFA standards. We want to make sure that every country in the world has at least one stadium which corresponds to FIFA standards to play international games and to showcase the country all over the world. And this partnership is exactly what will make this happen.
On to this now. Aston Martin's Chief Executive Officer Andy Cowell is on the verge of losing his job after just over a year in the role. Now, multiple senior sources in Formula One have told BBC Sport that Aston Martin team owner Lawrence Stroll is poised to act after disagreements between Cowell as well as the team's new managing technical partner Adrian Newey. So no final decision has been taken, but it seems Cowell is said to lose his role running Aston Martin as CEO as well as team principal, although he may retain a position within the wider organisation. No replacement has been confirmed, but former Red Bull team principal Christian Horner is among a possible candidate for the job. Horner, sacked by Red Bull back in July of this year, is pushing very hard for a leadership role at Aston Martin, along with a shareholding in the team. Stroll is also said to have appointed, or rather approached, former McLaren team principal Andres Seidel, current head of Audi Formula One project Matteo Bonotto, as well as Aston Martin's former CEO Martin White-Marsh. We'll stay with Formula One news now. CrowdStrike founder as well as the CEO George Kurtz has bought into the Mercedes Formula One team by taking 15% of the one-third stake held by principal Toto Wolff. Now, no financial details were given for the personal acquisition, but media reports last week said the deal valued the former champions at a record $6 billion. Now, Austrian Wolff, Mercedes-Benz, as well as Jeff Ratcliffe's petrochemicals giant Enios each hold one-third stakes, and the governance and the leadership of the team will not be affected by the deal that was made last week. Now, American Kurtz, who has competed as Lance Mans as well as other endurance events in sport cars, will become the team's technology advisor and also joins the strategic steering committee alongside Wolff, Mercedes-Benz chair Ola Kalenius, as well as the Enios founder Jimmy Ratcliffe. He said that all of the other the shareholders were fully aware of the transaction as it unfolded. Meanwhile, cybersecurity company CrowdStrike has been a team partner since 2019 with branding on the car as well as apparel. And finally, Portland Trail Blazers head coach Swansea Billups pleaded not guilty in Brooklyn Federal Court on Monday in a sweeping criminal case accusing the NBA Hall of Famer of conspiring with the mafia to rig illicit poker games. Now, the arrangement took place during a hearing for all 31 defendants in the case. Prosecutors say they orchestrated an elaborate scheme using athlete star power to lure victims to card games, then cheat them using high-tech equipment. Billups is charged with fraud and money laundering conspiracy, while former Cleveland Cavaliers guard Damon Jones was also charged in the case, along with alleged members of the New York La Cosa Nostra organized crime families. They have all pleaded not guilty to all the charges. The case is related to a criminal probe of alleged bet rigging by pro athletes, which are coincides with the explosion of legal sports betting in the USA in recent years. In poker case, the prosecutors say Billups, as well as other pro athletes, enticed victims into games against cheaters who used X-ray card tables as well as altered shuffling machines to learn the cards in victims' hands. Now, the alleged scheme also dates back to 2019 and defrauded victims of at least $7 million. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Call us as well on +27 11714 4459. More sporting updates tomorrow morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Thank you to Buntle Hedbush and Musibudi Makura. They bring us to exactly 4:41 Central African time as we turn our focus now to issues of energy. The Zimbabwe-Zambia Energy Project Summit, known as ZimZam, is set to take place from tomorrow until the 28th of November at the Livingston Resort in Zambia. The event seeks to accelerate energy projects by bringing together key stakeholders to share information, discuss opportunities, as well as forge partnership. This year's summit is taking place under the theme Mines and Energy, how stakeholders have fast-tracked private sector projects to become Africa's top investment destination. For more on this, we joined on the line by Cheryl Byrne, Head of Project Finance in Energy and Infrastructure at Standard Bank CIB. A very good afternoon to you, Cheryl. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
So how key is the Zimbabwe-Zambia Energy Project Summit to Standard Bank's broader role in supporting Southern Africa's energy transition?
So Standard Bank is present in 21 markets, and Zambia and Zimbabwe are two of our key markets. And they also have some of the key ingredients that are ripe for investment in the energy sector, being they're short of energy, and they also have open regulations known as open access, which allows private sector to participate in helping solve the energy crisis in those countries. So it's a very critical juncture for us, and we're very happy to be at the conference supporting the energy initiatives.
I mean, these two countries are also quite strategically placed. And what is it that makes the Zimbabwe-Zambia corridor an important focus area for energy development in Southern Africa?
So Zimbabwe-Zambia corridor is important because one, the role of critical minerals. So Zimbabwe has a lot of mining, but it's also the path from South Africa up into the transmission path up into Zambia and DRC. And Zambia and DRC have a lot of copper and also DRC cobalt mining. And those are two very much in-demand commodities requiring a lot of power to be able to supply these minerals into the critical mineral value chain, which is necessary for battery and other technologies as part of the renewable energy global initiatives that are happening across the globe. So it's a very key pathway to the load centers in the mining regions of northern Zambia and DRC.
And let's look at the readiness of the Zimbabwe-Zambia projects, these interconnection projects. Are they bankable at this stage, or is there more groundwork needed in order to get them to be financially backable?
So if we look at the interconnectors, there is work to be done, but that work is currently underway. So Climate Fund Managers is leading the charge with the Southern African Power Pool, and we hope to play a role in providing a large portion of funding there when it comes to market. But they are looking at an interconnector upgrade project to allow more power to flow, for example, from South Africa through Zimbabwe into Zambia and DRC, but also to increase interconnection capacity in other markets such as Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, etc. So from a transmission point of view, there is work underway. It still has to happen, but generation in country can start filling the gaps in Zambia and Zimbabwe. So that's the immediate, and the transmission is the near-term solution.
You mentioned a lot of the economic benefits that come from developing that corridor and from scaling energy infrastructure between Zimbabwe and Zambia, highlighting that it not only benefits the two countries, but the entire southern African region as well. Are there any other, perhaps, economic benefits that you may not have highlighted now that you think are worth mentioning?
So I think what's very important is, from a mining point of view, is to get beneficiation in those countries, and for that you need power. So it's important that countries that have mining have sufficient power so that the raw material can be processed in country and not just always sent offshore. So that's the first thing. The second thing, mines and industry can act as a load center to support these projects, which can then also help expand into electrification for the country. So they can act as the anchor, but the addition of the electricity can also add residential, which then leads to more entrepreneurship, access to internet, access to basic power, which can fuel more growth. So we do see energy as the backbone for economic growth in the region.
Is this perhaps one of the reasons why there has been a delayed response to the beneficiation? Has the lack of energy, the lack of that power, the lack of that backbone been one of the key factors, do you think?
I do think it has to be a factor for sure. Because you're not able, I mean, at the moment, mines in some of these regions are not able to expand fast enough, never mind build smelters and other things. So I definitely think it is one of the factors. There's also a mindset shift that needs to happen at times, but you can't really push that mindset shift until you've got the basics, such as the power, to allow that to happen.
And what are the low-hanging fruit at the moment, as far as, you know, pressing play on these corridors, and what are the timelines that we're looking at?
So the low-hanging fruit that we see at the moment is in-country generation. So not necessarily going from South Africa up and using those interconnectors. That will come in the future. But Zambia and Zimbabwe both have open access. So that means you can supply from a private power plant to a private off-taker, such as a mine, and you use the utilities grid. So the utility will receive a fee for that, but it allows quicker access to power onto the grid. Private sector just naturally moves a little bit quicker than public sector. And also it can deal with some of the bankability concerns, given the challenges that sometimes government fiscus has in terms of funding large infrastructure and putting it on their balance sheet. So we definitely see low-hanging fruit is getting generation on the ground in Zimbabwe and Zambia as quickly as possible. And then expansion will come thereafter regionally through the interconnectors and the transmission upgrades that RTIF is looking to do.
A really great point that you bring up there, Cheryl, just the importance of domestic stability and domestic production first in order to be able to enable that cross border power trade in the near future. Thank you so much for your time, Cheryl Byrne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. She's head of project finance in energy and infrastructure at Standard Bank CIB, focusing on ZimZim. That's the Zimbabwe Zambia Energy Project Summit. It's exactly 4:49.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 4:49 Central African time. Vous d'Afrique standing by with Joël. We are going to be bidding you farewell for today, but as we always do, we leave you in very capable hands as we hand over now to the French desk. Bonjour, mademoiselle.
Bonjour, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa sur Vue d'Afrique. Tout à l'heure, il s'agira du sommet EUEA, Union européenne et Union africaine de Luanda en Angola. L'Afrique plaide pour une représentation équitable. On en parlera avec notre invité en ligne et nous parlerons également ce mardi 25 novembre où le monde célèbre la journée internationale pour l'élimination des violences à l'égard des femmes. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's Joël with Vue d'Afrique coming up in the next 10 minutes. But for now, China has pledged to strengthen its cooperation with South Africa, aiming to deepen mutual political trust between the two nations. Premier Li Qiang made the remarks following his meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa in Johannesburg. He conveyed warm greetings from Chinese President Xi Jinping and highlighted the long-standing solid friendship shared by the two countries. Channel Africa economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
Premier Lee said Beijing is prepared to work with Pretoria to safeguard the multilateral trading system and to advance the early implementation of zero-tariff treatment for South African goods. He added that China is ready to broaden cooperation across a wide range of sectors to further support the shared development of both countries and the African continent as a whole. Xing Zhen is the Chinese delegation spokesperson at the G20.
No matter what the U.S. attitude is, the China will still be firmly standing with South Africa and the rest of the global South country.
Zheng, however, cautions that the global governance system is facing significant challenges.
I agree to what you said, Director. I think currently the global governance faces many challenges, and I think multilateralism is one of the answers to these challenges, and China will fully promote multilateralism, no matter in G20, in the United Nations, or in other multilateralism for platforms.
He says China is committed to invest in the automotive industry, energy and artificial intelligence, as well as advancing science and technology innovation, including satellite navigation.
But China is currently, China will definitely invest more to African continent, especially in South Africa. I think we now have more than 3,000 companies here in South Africa hiring local employees and creating jobs. Yes, and we'll keep doing that.
As South Africa and China look to expand cooperation across key economic and technological sectors, both governments say they remain committed to strengthening a partnership they describe as strategic and mutually beneficial, with new investments on the horizon and ongoing dialogue at the highest levels. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Now, as the world shifts its focus towards energy transitions and long-term resilience, insights from the recent Water Security Africa Summit have brought renewed urgency to one fundamental question. And what is that question? Well, it's simply, do we really have a water problem at scale? South Africa's experience often anchors this conversation, with implications of water scarcity extending far beyond the national borders and affecting food systems, industrial activity and cross-border trade throughout the African continent. These insights were also highlighted in a thought leadership attributed to Dr. Manasseh Alagboaso, Head Business Ecosystems and Sustainability for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank, titled Africa's Next Crisis, Water Scarcity looms as the continent faces dual threats of water and energy shortages. To further unpack this, he joins us to speak to Africa's evolving water risk profile, also focusing on the role of financial institutions in enabling sustainable water infrastructure and the innovative approaches emerging across public as well as private sectors to strengthen Africa's water resilience. Very good afternoon to you, Dr. Alagboaso. Good to have you with us on African Business.
Good afternoon, Thami, and good day to your listeners.
So would you say that water scarcity will, in the future, be perhaps more costly than even the power crisis itself?
Yes, a definite yes to that, Thami. And if I may elaborate more, it's a known fact that is easier to live without power than to live without water, whether you're talking about households or industrial processes or agriculture. It is far more, the consequences are far more reaching than electricity or power.
Now let's look at the causes of the current water scarcity situation. How much of that is due to climate change and water conservation as well as management in sub-Saharan Africa?
I wouldn't blame climate change first and foremost. I think what climate change has done is to exacerbate the problem. But if you even before climate change became topical, what has really happened is, one, across sub-Saharan Africa, we have not managed to pay enough attention to water in terms of sustainability. There's a stat that says that 63% of people in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to decent basic water services. That's more than half, 63%. It just shows you. And if you think of population growth, so you have a scenario where water is not being managed efficiently, and it's not enough of it anyway to go around at any point in time, because it's not every water out there that is potable, that is suitable for human livelihood. You have that situation where you don't have enough of it and it's not being managed, and you have population growth. So even when government and private sector is putting infrastructure in place to meet up the demand, it's always a case, a race against the rate of population growth. At any point in time, we are always on a back foot.
There's the domestic usage and domestic need for water, and then there is the private sector. How much does the private sector contribute to the water consumption on the continent?
I mean, if you look at the split of often we always say agriculture takes the biggest component, and depending on what stats you look at, it can range from just over 50% to just over 60%. And just below that, then you have industry and then you have household in terms of percentages. However, it's important to point out that in many instances, even though agriculture has the highest share of water usage, it's known that agriculture has what is left. So industry and household need to come first, and whatever is left then goes to agriculture. So again, that percentage might not be exact science, but it's known that agriculture has the biggest component, then followed by industry, and then followed by household. But the point here is not so much what percentage they have. The point always is it enough? And when we talk about household, it's as if it's uniform. Take a South African situation, for instance. You have household and you have household. So people living in formal settlement, what access do they have? And for whatever they have access to, is it potable? Is it of a good quality? If you compare that to a northern suburb in Johannesburg, it's a totally different dynamics where you're talking about availability might be there might be interruptions, there might be, what we call non-revenue water and all of. So it's different dynamics when you look at different sections of the country. It's important to bring that nuance in when we talk about water usage in relation to households.
And perhaps as we wrap up this conversation, and exactly on that very same point, you've highlighted a need for businesses to balance the need for water conservation with the demands of their businesses. Where do financial institutions like yourselves, like Standard Bank, where do you fit in facilitating this shift?
We are part of the society, and a very responsible part of the society for that matter. And we, for once, have been trying to drive up awareness and visibility of this crisis, hence the thought leadership you made reference to. Mm-hmm. But importantly, we're also putting solutions in place and making financing available to businesses for them to start coming onto water efficiency journey as part of our sustainability journey. Because if we don't do this, we're simply kicking the can down the road. It can be done, but we need partnership, we need collaboration, we need whole of society to be able to recognize this as the crisis that it is.
Dr.
And
Manasa,
then for people to participate.
Dr. Manasa, we thank you so much for your insight on this water situation as we focus on Water Security Africa Summit currently taking place. We thank you, sir, for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Thami.
Thank you. That's Dr. Manasa Alagwaso, Head for Business Ecosystems and Sustainability for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank. Well, that's how we do it for today, Africa. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the entire team at Africa in Business, give yourself a splendid evening further and do rester connecté as Vue d'Afrique comes up. It's 5 o'clock.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités